today for session number 9 of the Ed Collab. It looks like it's been a really amazing morning. I am here to talk about communities and authentic audience with my colleagues, Barbara Robbins and Kim Herzog and Fola Sumter. We're all from a similar community of educators and writers and readers, but we have very different communities as well where we teach. So I'm Rebecca Marsick. I teach in the Westport Public Schools in Westport, Connecticut, which is a predominantly wealthy white suburb of New York City. I'm a mom, I'm a reader, a writer, a native East Coaster, and those are just some of the communities I belong to, and we're going to each introduce ourselves to you based on the communities we belong to.
Hi, my name is Kim Herzog, and like Rebecca, I also teach in Westport at Staples High School. And some of the communities that I belong to, I'm an English teacher. I also run a program called Independent Learning Experiences at my school. I'm a mother, a reader, a writer. I am a National Writing Project teacher. I'm an East Coaster and originally a New Yorker, and I am female.
Hi, everybody. I'm Barb Robbins, and like Rebecca and Kim, I also teach at Staples High School in Westport. Similar to Rebecca, I'm also a literacy coach, work primarily with science and math teachers, and I also teach English at Staples. I'm a mom of 2 girls, a reader, a writer, also connected to National Writing Project as well, and just excited to be here with everybody today.
And I am Fola Sumter. I am working in Bridgeport Public Schools, which is a completely different community from Westport Public Schools. I'm an English teacher, a UConn early college experience teacher, a mother, reader, writer. I'm also a beauty consultant. I've lived between New York and Connecticut my whole life, and I am a woman.
Great. So we are going to begin talking about why we have chosen to work with authentic audiences for our students. So there's a lot of research about how important the authentic audience is, but I think as we all know, as teachers, one of the main issues in our classrooms is that oftentimes the only audience for our students is ourselves as the teacher and sometimes the classmates, which can cause students to really just write for their teacher and oftentimes write what they think their teacher wants them to say. So we're trying to combat this by connecting to community members and different communities in order to provide authentic audiences for our students. And just some of the research that backs this is the National Writing Project. Talks about how an author's purpose for public writing is dependent upon the anticipated reader, and the primary audience must be a reader other than the teacher. So that's something that we're working on a lot through this work that we're doing between communities. Grant Wiggins talks about the consequences of your writing matter for a specific audience in a specific situation. So we found that students really tend to up the level of their writing when they know that someone other than their teacher is going to be reading it. And Kelly Gallagher, one of his 6 pillars of writing success is that students need to write for authentic purposes and authentic audiences. Another component of this is the idea of reading as a social activity. So part of what we also did was work with book clubs. And Sarah Ahmed talks about how we make meaning from and mediate our relationship with the world is based on social comprehension. And reading really helps students be social with one another, and it gives them something to ground their conversations in. Dr. Rachel Gabriel cites the Vygotskian notion that cognitive abilities develop as a result of social interactions, and participating in conversation is a way of engaging thinking that leads to learning. And so often it's hard for us to have our students participate in real conversations about real issues, and we believe that reading great books together is a way and a means for students to do so, and for us to be able to teach them how to do this appropriately so that when they go into the world, they can have these often difficult conversations with other people. And then again, Kittle and Gallagher in a recent article state that book clubs allowed their classrooms to be responsive, raise reading volume, and connect students to other readers. And this is through work that they did with one another across the country and across their classrooms. So as we continue today with this work, please tweet at us at the Ed Collab Gathering with a space, #9. And you can connect with me at Rebecca Marsick and Kim with @Mrs. Herzog SHS. This will be on each slide. Thanks. We're going to start with the reading and writing fiction work that Kim did with the senior center in town, and I'm going to let her tell you about how she made the connection and what her students did with the work.
Great, thank you, Rebecca. So I have been teaching a reading and writing fiction course at my high school for about the past 5 years. And in speaking with my department chair, I always tell her that we would love to connect with different audiences that are engaging in similar work that we do, where we're reading short pieces of fiction as well as longer work, then sort of using their work as a model to learn how to become stronger writers of fiction through our reading. And recently, our senior center, our local Westport Senior Center, had reached out to our department chair, and she actually asked if we had any sort of group at our school that was working on writing, because she has 2 different writers groups and she'd love to connect us. And so my department chair sent me her information, and soon after I hooked up with Jan Basson, who is the head of our senior center, and I told her about how interested we were in this. And before long, we set up a meeting. And through this meeting, we sort of shared our different pedagogy when it comes to our study of fiction and our goals for our students and our learners, no matter their age, which was really pretty cool because there was so much overlap. And so Jan shared that she had 2 different writers groups that she worked with of about 20 total different learners. And I had 2 sections of my reading and writing fiction class, and another teacher had another. So we had about 50 to 60 students between those classes. And so we decided that what we wanted to try and do was find a way where students would actually become writing groups, share our writing, and really kind of become these sort of critical feedback groups for each other. And at that moment in time, my class was working on flash fiction pieces, which are short works, no longer than 2 pages. And we were really studying description in Gotham Writer's Workshop. That's the textbook that we used. And then Jan shared that her group was working on memoir. And so together we sort of decided that we would find a piece that we could share together. And through that, we actually began studying craft of what we wanted to have students study. And we really focused on description and voice. And the way in which we kind of decided that we would do this is I found a short piece that was originally published in Food and Wine magazine called Bittersweet by Melanie Thernstrom. And I shared that piece. We shared a couple pieces between us, but we decided on this one. We worked together and annotated it together as a small group. And then we kind of went back to our classes and had them read and study it for how different elements were being used as a vehicle to represent deeper meaning and purpose. And so we decided, what's the one thing that could really tie everyone together? And we decided that was food, because everybody eats. They either love food, they hate food, and they have a lot of strong feelings regarding food. And so we decided that what we would do is similar to how Bittersweet does it. We would use food as a vehicle, and that was going to be our concept. And so I created an assignment of flash fiction using description where food had to be used as a vehicle to reveal some sort of a purpose. And my students could either choose to do this as a personal piece of memoir, or they could do a flash fiction piece. Meanwhile, the seniors were really focused on memoir, and so they were going to use food as a vehicle to represent something personal about them. And then what we decided was we would actually have a writers' conference where we would come together and share our work, which was really exciting because during this moment, we met at the senior center and we arranged for a conference. We actually got the food donated by local eateries like Trader Joe's, and we had pizza, and the students really worked together to provide really awesome feedback. They shared their work, they read it out loud, and got sort of feedback through the different writers. And it really revealed that it doesn't matter your age, that we're all working towards becoming better readers and better writers. And it was really amazing to see the students all around the room share and really connect with this audience that they didn't necessarily expect to, and actually write down the notes that they were getting from the diverse audience that they were working with. And the way that we arranged it was that students had different kind of roundtables, and they would work for about 20 minutes per roundtable. I think one of the most powerful moments that I noticed was that the students told me that they wanted to go back to the writers group, and some actually followed up and continued meeting with some of the senior writers and getting feedback throughout the semester, which was really great. And one of my students in her final portfolio shared that she never would have thought her piece would have overlapped so much with the seniors. That was one of the coolest experiences I've had, and their stories were so powerful. There was nothing better than going on that field trip to the senior center. And in fact, this has been something that we now include as part of the course. And I continue to work with Jan, and we work on different pieces. And at least once a semester, we've been working with our senior writing partners moving forward to provide these really critical friends so that we get feedback from a diverse audience, and we really make connections that we never would have anticipated in in the past. And you could actually click on that link right there, or you can Google this story. It's called Seniors and Teens Share Stories and Lunch, and it's published on Dan Boog's local blog 06880 and highlights the work in which we've been doing with the seniors. It's really been a wonderful experience. Next up, I believe we will be talking more about collaborating with audiences with children's literature and elementary school partnerships. So Rebecca, if you actually want to just give an overview of that.
Thanks, Kim. So we're moving from working with seniors into working with elementary school students. We have a new class this year. We're fortunate to have a lot of elective English classes at Staples, and one of them is Children's Lit. And we decided that in order for us to really have an authentic audience for students in the picture book study that was occurring, we wanted to have children for the students to read to and also to collaborate with. So I was able to reach out to my fellow elementary literacy coaches, and we talked about, some collaborations and teachers that they thought might be interested. And we had an overwhelming number of elementary school teachers who really wanted to participate and connect with the high school kids. We also had elementary principals who we talked to who really were incredibly important in terms of setting up the scheduling and the busing and all of the things that we needed to do to coordinate working together. And we also had our department chair who was very supportive. So in all of this work that we're doing, it has been essential to connect to members of our community because we need the support from them just in terms of logistics, in terms of finding people to work with. So this next project was really about working with local children in our elementary schools in order to support them and to support our high school students in this course. So Barb and Kim, I'll pass it on to you.
All right, thank you so much, Rebecca. So when Kim and I dreamed of this course, we knew that we absolutely wanted to have Read Aloud be kind of the cornerstone of the class. And we began, as Rebecca was saying, to think about how could we create and foster this partnership? And what would be some opportunities within our community where kids could potentially practice their Read Aloud skills? We knew that we were going to ground our work in studying the Jim Trelease handout and learn about different Read Aloud skills. We knew that we would be modeling for kids how to read aloud. We knew we would have them be practicing read aloud strategies in our class with other students. But we were then thinking, how could we build outside of our community in our classroom to really afford them the real authentic chance to have a young opportunity to child and read to classroom. And so like Rebecca was saying, she was super instrumental in being able to help create those connections. And basically what we began to do is we all paired with a partner teacher, and we would co-plan with them. And we ended up having 3 sessions over the course of a semester. And what we did was we would write letters back and forth to begin to create that bond across
I'm going to jump in quickly because it sounds like Barb's volume is going in and out.
Oh, sure.
Okay, just until we troubleshoot this, I will just kind of quickly tell you about the letters that they sent back and forth. And so in order to kind of create a community, the students started writing back and forth to each other. And at first it was just sort of getting to know each other. And so that when they first met each other, they would already have this sort of background information and be a little bit more receptive to working together. And it actually worked really wonderfully for the students to speak with each other and sort of get to know each other through these letters, because as soon as they met each other, they already had things to talk about. And Barb, I'm going to throw it back to you if you want to talk more about that.
Are you hearing me, Kim?
Yes.
Okay, so we're good. Our sound's good? All right, awesome. Sorry about that, folks. So we, as we were saying, like the kids would write back to each other. I even had my kids even wrote Valentines to each other, and they'd write about things like favorite books and, if you could be a superhero, what would your power be, and favorite foods. And my high school kids were sharing their favorite memories, and they began to develop this bond. And so we went to visit with them 3 times. The first time, kids shared books back and forth, picture books. that to practice those skills. And the little kids were really practicing their reading comprehension, and the older kids were practicing their read aloud skills. We did some co-authoring together of writing, and basically the whole buildup was the final exam or our final summative assessment for this class was that kids created their own picture book. And what was really wonderful about the fact that they had an authentic audience was that they created their picture book specifically geared to their partner. And so for some kids, they named their protagonist after their buddy, or if their buddy liked soccer, the actual the premise of the plot of the story had to revolve around the game of soccer. And so it became like something very custom and personable, while also applying all the strategies that we learned throughout our class, as well as author's craft and illustration principles. And I have to say, with an elective of juniors and seniors, typically we start to see a little senioritis. I'm sure you all can relate to that. But when we brought in the authentic audience, kids were very inspired to create their best work, knowing that it was going to be for their buddy. And they created 2 copies, one that they gave to their buddy and one for our class. So Kim is I'm going to kick it over to Kim, and she's going to talk to you a little bit and show you some examples of the beautiful work that her kids created for the final assessment.
So what I'm going to do is walk you through 2 examples, and it's just kind of quick samples of the pages. And this one is actually called The Princess and the Protest. And one thing that I think is super cool is that the students were inspired by the conversations they had with their students in the first grade for my class. And so for this particular storybook, the student said, you know what, I want to see a princess, but I don't want the boy to save her. I want her to be strong. And my student was totally inspired to continue her story and really create a story based on this interest of the student. So they really were writing towards that authentic audience. And as you can see in the pictures, if you know anything about Molly Bang, there's some really specific illustrations that are done here to represent different theories that they had studied throughout the course. And so she's applying not only that authentic audience, but also our studies from throughout the course as sort of a summative assessment. And this one is actually really cool because what she also included was an archetype, which is, the damsel in distress a bit, which is a bit stereotypical, but she turned it on her head where the princess was actually the powerful one, and she led a protest against the king. And one thing that I thought was really thought-provoking about this one in particular is she also applied something else we practiced, where we took a fairy tale and we turned around the stereotypical archetypes to represent archetypes that we want children seeing today and that we think should be more prominent in literature. And so she created this strong princess character. And then throughout the reading, my students, as well as Barb's class and the other children's literature classes, had different questions that they asked before reading. And so for this one of the questions that the student asked her group was, what is a protest? Have you or your family ever been to a march? So they were really trying to also connect with the environment in which we had plenty of marches that were happening in the area about all different kinds of issues. And it really led to an interesting conversation. She was also able to kind of uncover the vocabulary issues that students may or may not have when reading this text. Then after reading, she also asked when students might have stuck up for something they cared about. And so she really got to understand and know her buddies a little bit more too, and get them involved in the reading, which is exactly what Trulise advocates for, that reading is not just something to be done to a child, but something that should be a conversation. And so this book really showcased lots of different things that we'd studied throughout the semester, but it also took into account this authentic audience, which was exactly what we were going for. And in the next example that I'm going to show you, this is a different student, as you can tell just from the style, but still same sort of things going on, where there's applications from Molly Bang's Picture This and different applications about read alouds and how to use the space on a page. But in this one in particular, this student was inspired because the buddy that the student had shared with the group that he was overscheduled and he wishes he could just play soccer. And this is something that we really kind of see within our community, that the parents want to get their child involved in everything so that they can figure out what they like to do. But sometimes students just want to focus on one thing. And so the student was really inspired by this and wrote the book, True Passion. And so in this book, one of the cover questions when the student showcased the cover was, what do you think this book would be about? What is passion? And so they're also kind of trying to have students predict what might happen within the text. And then later, There were more prediction questions. What do you think will happen when Alex, the protagonist, is honest with his mom about only wanting to keep playing soccer? And then after reading, the student asked, what are you passionate about? All students also asked what their favorite picture was, as well as their favorite moment in the story. Because in my class, students read not only to their first grade buddies that they'd had throughout the semester, but they also shared these books with a kindergartner, as well as their first grade buddy and a second grader. And so they were able to kind of see different overlaps, which was really pretty cool. On our way home from the final field trip, which was their exam where they shared the book, I also asked students on Google Classroom just to share how the experience went and also how it went in comparison with those different groups. And this student in particular, after sharing this particular book, said, I really enjoyed reading to our buddies throughout the semester. It was really unique to read to the 3 different age groups, and they responded to different things. The older students asked a lot of questions and shared personal experiences. And the second graders in particular explored the deeper meaning and messages. And she even noted that they looked through different lenses and said that the hero was their favorite character because they don't often see a male teacher, which I thought was awesome. And I think, Barb, you're going to share the big takeaway with this.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was thinking as you were talking about this, that not only did we work with these different grades, but we also had a chance to have a partnership with our new daycare program in our school, which the kids are really young. And so they were seeing, again, like that range of ages from like a 3-year-old all the way up through like a second grader. What was really great, I have to say, about this, the big takeaway, again, I think is that the kids, it sort of brings out like the best version of every kid. The older kids really I didn't see a single kid on their phone. They were eye to eye with the little ones. It's like, it's a beautiful thing to observe. We actually were on our trip yesterday. I'll just take a minute to share this anecdote. I'll try not to get teary, but we have a student who's had some troubles, some disciplinary troubles and suspensions and things of that nature. It's been a tough run for this young man. And on our trip, it was his first time that he was able to go. And just to see him with his buddy was just a beautiful mentorship. To see him sitting so engaged, so tuned in, smiles. It was like a highlight, I think, for his senior year. And he said that as well. And we really talked about that positivity. And that anecdote to me, I feel like is worth sharing because it highlights, I think, the power of when you bring that authentic audience, everyone rises to the level. I really encourage you to think about it. Another thing I want to mention just briefly, beyond the writing of the picture books and also of the read alouds, one of the things that just worked out really well this year is this semester, the school that we're working with, they are doing a whole book for the whole school called Charlotte's Web. And we actually had just studied it. So with that, we're also going to be doing some shared writing, some character writing, some discussion about the text. So looking at other ways beyond just different facets of literacy that we could be doing with our partners. And just, again, the kids really, I even had one kid, we go 3 times and she said to the class, hey, could we do a fundraiser so we could go more often, so that they love it. They want to go. They're surprised by the level of what the buddies are able to do. And it's really a highlight for them. I want to talk a little bit about some testimonials. So one, that,
Barb, can I just mention one quick thing? Sorry.
No, go for it.
Just this picture, I think, is a really cool moment. Before we get into the testimonials, it actually leads really nicely into it. In this image, one thing that I noticed, and I think, Barb, we've talked about this before too, but one of the coolest moments that we've noticed is that we had this whole project of the students creating a picture book and then sharing it with the kids. But what ends up happening almost every session is the kids get really excited to share their writing too. And in this particular image, you can see that a student here is sharing their writing with our high school students. And so they really become this really cool community of readers and writers. And you see that transfer, and the students get excited to share their writing. And it actually showcases that writing should be something that's public and shared and celebrated. So I just think it's a really cool moment. All right, back to Barb for the testimonials. Okay. It sounds like we're having a little bit.
Look at the body language of the kids. Should we talk about testimonials? So, this is from a high school student. She talked about enjoying the opportunity to receive input from the kids because she knew what they enjoyed and what they wanted to read. It was refreshing to get back into the mindset of what it's like to be back in that second grader's point of view. And just a quick sidebar that I wanted to share. When we go back to these schools, a lot of times the same teachers are there that were there when our high school kids were in second grade. And actually, one of the reading specialists came in, and when she saw one of our students who was there, who she'd provided reading support all throughout elementary school, she was actually moved to tears. So again, it's just making those, because the high school kids aren't going back to second grade, and it's making those connections. It's exciting. So last little testimonial, and then I think we're going to start to think a little bit about our last segment of our presentation. Is just when we were there visiting yesterday, one of the second graders said this and talked about liking working with the buddies. She said it was nice to have them read to us, and they gave us things to work on. And she was so perceptive in kind of acknowledging one specific area that she was inspired to work on with her buddy. She said, I was bad at stopping at sentences when there was a period at the end, and she recognized this. And she said that her high school buddy kind of gave her some tips and encouraged her to work on that. And I thought it was so perceptive of this young student to be thinking really around this one particular skill set. So that's just one example of how exciting and how worthwhile it is when you can build these opportunities for authentic audiences. So I think I'm going to pass it over, if I could, to Rebecca to talk about our last part of our presentation this morning about book clubbing across town. Go for it, Rebecca.
All right. So our next segment is going to be about book clubbing. We formed this wonderful partnership with FOLA at Harding, and it really began when we had a library media specialist who wanted to find some schools to work with the book, The Hate You Give, because he felt like there were a lot of connections that students could make with one another across different communities. So we worked with him. We worked with a professor we know at Fairfield University who had some connections, who knew FOLA's assistant principal, who was really essential in helping us form this partnership. And through all of these different people, we were connected with FOLA, which has been such a gift for all of us, working with her and her students. And I'm going to let FOLA and Barb talk about, the incredible work they did with The Hate You Give and this year with Dear Martin. But really, again, I can't emphasize enough how important it is that we make connections to the different people in our community who are educators and, just in all different aspects of education, because it's those personal connections that allow us to find really the best people to work with and therefore bring different communities to our students. And as we move into talking about this, I just want to share quickly these two quotes from Angie Thomas's The Hate You Give and Nick Stone's Dear Martin. So in The Hate You Give, she says, what's the point of having a voice if you're going to be silent in those moments you shouldn't be? And I think that part of connecting with communities other than our own, outside of our own classroom walls and even the walls of our town, are that it allows students to have voices with people that they don't usually have voices with, and that this then allows them to think about times when they might be silent but then decide to speak, which I think is really important. And as Nick Stone says in Dear Martin, but before you start saying something isn't fair, you should consider your starting point versus someone else's. And we all have different starting points. And I think sometimes our kids at Staples, they're with kids all day long who come from very similar starting points. And it's really important for them to talk to people who've had different experiences from theirs. So I will pass this along to Fola and Barb to share.
All right. So last year, my assistant principal sent out an email that asked if anybody was interested in an interdistrict book club. And I looked at it and I pondered on it for a couple of days, and I talked to my students about it, and they said, let's give this a try. So over the course of a few weeks, we met and began planning. And what I found to be the best part of the planning is that we had the same concerns for our students in terms of reading and getting them engaged and why we wanted to do this project together. And that made all the difference, because when all the teachers have buy-in, we can get the students to have buy-in. So we developed a 6-week plan. With The Hate You Give, we broke the novel up into 6 segments, and the students had a reading schedule. They communicated with each other through Flipgrid, where they recorded videos, and created that conversation around the text. Part of the our planning, we had the students meet twice. The first time they came to Harding, and this was, my students were very nervous because they felt really insecure knowing that the students we were working with were from Westport, and here we're coming into, and they were coming to this building, which they did not feel that huge sense of pride for just yet, because a lot of my kids were defensive. But we looked at this story where we have the main character straddling both worlds, and the students said, okay, let's do this. And I love that. So over the course of the 6 weeks, they really looked at their ability to navigate text in both worlds. So students did their discussions through Flipgrid, which was great because they kept seeing their group members. They were always speaking with someone, and I encouraged them to also text through Flipgrid. Flipgrid has a feature where you can send text messages to your group members, and I encouraged them to do this. They had a format for this, so it wasn't just let's film and say what we want, but they needed to talk about theme. They needed to talk about the characters, form questions as to what was going on in the text. And myself and my co-teacher at Harding really wanted our students to focus on questioning, become active members of their learning community with developing those questions to have deep discussions. And it was amazing because our students started to realize that when you have a discussion with someone, you are participating. A teacher is not giving you the questions. You guys are coming to the table with what you need. And that was the most important part for them, because they started to see themselves as readers, not just students who were given a book to read. The next meeting we had at the end of the novel, the students got together at Staples and created body biographies, which were wonderful. There's a picture on the slide. They chose a character and they created symbols and words and quotes to describe this character, to really get into depth about who this character is and how they contributed to everything going on in the novel. What was the best part about this is at the end of creating the body biographies, when I got back to Harding with the students, they said, I don't want this to end. We've created this connection, and I still have more things I want to say. I still have more things I want to discuss with my partners. Barb and I decided that we would have them write to each other, and they created stories looking at issues within each of their communities as students, and they decided to write narratives. It was actually an amazing experience because I started seeing students for the first time who I struggled to get writing from sit down and say, I want to write something that I'm going to be proud of because my group is going to read this. They're going to see this. They know that I wrote this. And students were working diligently. They were creating. They were looking at the elements of a story and figuring out how to pull things together. And had they not had the audience to discuss this with, the audience to read their work, the products that I got from that would not have been nearly as wonderful as they were. So much so that this coming school year, students walked into my class and they said, oh, Miss Sumter works with Staples High School, and she is going to make you meet new people. She is going to have you write for people you don't know. She is going to have you speak to people you don't know, and discuss with people you don't know. And students were ready. They came in looking for those conversations because the conversations are important. They feel valued, and they felt valued once they knew that here's a community of people so unlike me, but in the same sense, the same teenager with the same issues that I have. And so now we're in year 2.
Great. Thanks, Fola. I'm just going to jump in for 1 second because we had a question on Twitter about what kind of training do we give the audience so student writers feel safe in sharing their writing, which is a really great question because it's so hard to talk about topics of race, with students, and even more difficult when you're combining students of different races who are usually in more homogeneous settings. So we started by going through some ground rules that we've talked about and learned at Border Crossers, which is now the Center for Racial Justice and Education. And they really talk about, centering on the issue and not on the people. They talk about how we need to be aware that everyone is going to say something that's offensive at some point in time and to somebody else, and everyone is going to feel offended at some point in time. And we need to own the words we say, and we need to own our feelings, and we need to use I statements to kind of call that out to each other and then apologize, accept, and move on. And so we went through that with students, and I believe that Fola and Barb also prepped them in their classrooms as well. But I think that part of what worked so well is the Flipgrid piece, because they felt like they were communicating with each other and actually also had time to craft their responses to one another. And I know that there were some groups I worked with who were saying certain things that I had to stop and say, like, okay, so let's think about how this might sound. Let's think about, like, what are you really trying to say? So it was also a great way for us to help them learn how to approach these kinds of topics. But great question, because you definitely have to teach into ways to have these conversations with people.
Yeah, great question. Thank you for asking that. So just a little bit more about year 2. So we decided, as Fola was saying, this was amazing. Let's continue this. And so then the choice became, well, we read The Hate U Give. Do we want to continue with that? And what we realized was the book had become so popular that a lot of our students had read it already. So then the question was, like, what text next? We knew we wanted something that was contemporary. We knew we wanted something that tackled some tough issues regarding potentially race. And the logical next text was Dear Martin by Nick Stone. Harding already had the books. We wrote a PTA grant and were able to get books for our kids, and the work began. We followed a similar process as Fola described from the first round. We did a couple of different things. This time we did some identity map work around the main characters. And beyond that, we followed really similar approach. This next semester, which we're actually about to launch in about 2 weeks, so stay tuned, we're going to be reading. We decided to look at something, a collection of poems called One Last Word by Nikki Grimes. And what that is it's Harlem Renaissance poems that Nikki Grimes has taken and written her own original poetry using the golden shovel method. And poems are also all paired with published art. So we're going to be studying these poems together, discussing them together, and then our dream, Fola and I we can't wait to see how they do, is that we're going to try to create a cross school poetry anthology with their own original poetry and hopefully art as well. So we'll let you know how that goes. But I know my kids have been asking, when are we going to be teaming up again with our buddies at Harding? And we just really look forward to that magic. I know we're starting to wind down, so just a couple last things just to mention is kind of to wrap up our work with Dear Martin. We were super lucky. Rebecca had a connection with Nick Stone, the author, through Saugatuck Story Fest. They'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. And so we surprised the kids with a Q&A. Fola, do you want to say anything about what that was like for your kids before we end with testimonials?
Yes. So my students, this year they've been incredibly lucky to meet quite a few authors, but a lot of them went to see Nick Stone at the Saugatuck Story Fest earlier. And then when they heard that we were Skyping with her, they were absolutely floored because they had discovered so much. They felt connected to her through the work, and a lot of what she spoke about, they said, as they're saying, they were like, I knew it. I knew she felt this way. And it's amazing because my we don't always get to have these experiences. My students, for the first time, are seeing authors and writers and readers as people that they can actually become.
And so just kind of, thanks, Fola, just wrapping up, the student testimonials, as Fola was saying, like it was incredible on both ends. Like we knew it was going to be great, but for my kids, you can kind of, I won't read it to you, but just some of the things that my student talked about. She talked about like understanding that the racism that still exists just a town over, and police brutality. And so for them, like reading it in a book or studying about it in a class, but now finding out about what the experiences are for one town over. And yet I also had students saying that they were realizing still that they're, at the end of the day, they're all teens. And so I think for one kid, one of my students said it was the single most important experience she had ever had in all of her high school, was being able to have these discussions. And Fola, do you want to just talk, just to wrap up, about your student testimonial?
Yes. So my first group, they were very defensive when we started. And one young lady, she immediately did not want anything to do with the project. And she started, as we worked, she started to warm up. And by the end, she really said and understood that each one of them are teens, and everybody has a different worldview, but at the same time, we can come together and have discussions without there being any animosity or any issues. And I absolutely love that, to see that transition from completely shut down, I don't want to do this, to she's actually one of the students who runs to my classroom every now and then and says, hey, can I come with you guys to Staples when you go again? Because she really enjoyed meeting new people and learning from new people, and understanding that just because someone doesn't live your life, they don't have to hate your life. They can actually understand who you are. Yeah, and Rebecca, do you want to talk about Saugatuck Story Fest?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So we we mentioned this a few times, but the final piece is that we've been working to. Last year was our inaugural Story Fest, and I'm going to pop up a slide so you can see the date for it this year. And basically, we created a way that we wanted to connect communities through story. And on September 28th, we're going to have the festival again. Last year, we had over 3,000 people come and 50 community partners. People came from all over the tri-state area. It's a lot more than just YA, but we did have Jason Reynolds as our keynote, and Nick Stone came, and Robin Benway, the National Book Award winner. We had an event for middle school kids with Chris Grabenstein of Mr. Lemoncello's Library. We had events for young children with Victoria Kahn from Pinkalicious. And then we had a lot of things for adults too, including Sam Weller, who's the biographer of Ray Bradbury, which a lot of our high school kids wanted to come and see as well. So our goal is really to just connect communities through story. It's all free. And that's where Fola's students came, and they met Nick Stone and they met Jason Reynolds and they heard them speak. It was really an incredible day of just sharing stories and learning from these authors who are doing such necessary work.
I'm going to jump in too. Rebecca and I helped to co-plan this awesome event. And this year in particular, we are going to be having a teacher and educator track. And so we have some really exciting things planned with different panels and conversations with authors and educators alike. And so we encourage you to come join us. Everything is free, and it will be an amazing event.
So our final piece, as we are wrapping up, is we just would like you to think about who can you connect with in your communities to help you with this work. And it could be, local business owners. It could be, for Saugatuck Story Fest, we're working with people at our local public library. We couldn't do the festival without them. Are there parents in your community? We're so fortunate we have a lot of writers in our community who are parents who have reached out to say that they would love to help. So what are ways that you can connect with people in your community? And then what are some aspects of your curriculum that you can use to connect with other communities? So this idea of finding a text, a book that you might work through, or a project like creating picture books that you could then read to younger children, or just thinking about your seniors in your senior center who really love connecting with high school students and thinking about those shared experiences. And then how and where might authentic audiences benefit your students? Because obviously we can't do it all the time, unfortunately. Maybe in the future world we will be able to, and technology definitely helps, but like what are the areas where having an authentic audience is just essential, and how can you make that happen? Tweet your responses at us, the Ed Collab Gathering number 9. And thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions. And please reach out to us on Twitter anytime if you have questions about anything we've discussed. And thank you to my fellow co-presenters. This was great.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you all so much. This was great. Gave me so many great ideas. Give us all great ideas that we can take back, things to think about as well. So thank you all so much. We hope that everybody will stay with us and join us for the next round of sessions at 2. We have coming up Disrupt Writing to Center Students. We also have one on phonological awareness, the foundation for strong readers and writers. Also, we have ESPN, PBS, NewsHour, and cable news, frameworks for summary, analysis, and essays. And then also using tech tools to formatively assess in Reader's Workshop. So lots of great things still ahead. So please join us at 2. Thank you all again, and goodbye, everyone.